We want to briefly talk about a special role that is in the scriptures called a watchman. This term watchman is talked about in the 62nd and 52nd chapters of the book of Isaiah, and it refers to a person that has two major functions. Their first function is to be physically vigilant and to be extremely watchful of any impending danger, so that they can alert the people well in advance and give them time to adjust and prepare for any potential harm. Along with this, the watchman must also be sensitive and spiritually aware, because every physical reality has a spiritual counterpart that precedes the physical. And after they serve the first function, which is to warn, their second function is to not only call out the danger that is being planned by the enemy, but their second function is to also proclaim the good news of the salvation of God. So if you remember, in the old days, most cities would be surrounded by a wall. And on the top of that wall, there would be a high point in the city where this watchman would look out into the field, into the desert, into the grassy areas or the plains. And they would look to see if there was any enemy combatants that were approaching. If they saw anything that was of danger to the people, they would sound the alarm and let the people know to gear up and get ready for war. But at the same time, on the spiritual tip, the watchman was also responsible for being an intermediary between God and the people. So he would remind the people of God's promises. He would remind the people of their duty and obligation to Allah. And fulfilling both of these roles, it says in the book of Isaiah chapter 52, verse 7 and 8, listen to these words. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace, that bringeth good tidings of good, that publisheth salvation, that saith unto Zion, thy God reigneth. Thy watchmen shall lift up thy voice, with a voice together shall they sing, for they shall see eye to eye when the Lord shall bring again Zion. So this morning, we have a special presenter who not only has dedicated his life to the resurrection of the dead, but he is fulfilling the role of a watchman unto God's chosen people, the black man and woman of America. He repeats the guidance and words of our teacher, leader, and guide, the Honorable Minister Farrakhan. And when the enemy plans evil for us, it is he who stands before the world, and with bold and courageousness and without fear, he stands and declares what thus said the Lord. If you recall, when the COVID vaccine shots were out, the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, being the watchman, came before us and said what? Do not take the shot. It was the little watchman and Minister Ishmael Muhammad that came behind the teacher and reminded us over and over again, week after week, to not take the shot. And science is bearing witness to the fact that we receive divine revelation. A watchman is someone that we should appreciate, brothers and sisters, because they are the voice of God among us in the absence of God's presence. They tell us what God wants, when we should move, when we should hold fast. And this is the most beautiful of gifts that we can have, because the greatest of all gifts in creation is the gift of divine guidance. Our brother recently has been traveling. He had to make a few stops. And over the last few weeks, myself, along with Brother Jeffrey, along with Brother Dimitri, we had a chance to be little watchmen on the wall and to toot the little trumpet and the little horn. But back in Chicago this morning, after traveling over a few weeks, to feed us and to not only feed the physical or to feed the spiritual, but to feed our souls, we have returning here at Mosque Maryam, the National Assistant Minister to the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, to not only warn us of the plans of the enemy, but to also declare the salvation of our Lord. Please help me to receive that watchman, our brother, Student Minister Ishmael Muhammad.
Of the Messiah gives includes alerting the people to the plots of the wicked leaders who still hold sway over their lives. So the warning is just not of Allah's impending wrath that the Messiah gives. He also gives the warning of the plots against the lives of his people and the lives of humanity in general. This is why in the Bible, the Messiah is referred to as a watchman. It states, Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore, hear the word at my mouth and give them warning from me. Now, a watchman is a person who keeps guard over something to protect it from harm or destruction. Well, since the black people of America are the real children of Israel, then the house of Israel also refers to us. The super rich are in a desperate frenzy to salvage their wealth. And since their wealth has been accumulated on the backs of the 85%, which is the general population, then the schemes being devised to mitigate and or recoup their losses will obviously be against the 85%. They have notoriously heartless schemes underway to maim and murder many human beings, including most Americans. Well, we should be able to see that today. So let me alert you to such a scheme, since it's the messenger's duty to warn you of what's being planned against you. Well, the following comes from an article titled Secret COVID-19 Manhattan Project led by billionaires seeking to influence Trump admin. It states, the Manhattan Project was a scientific project that led to the development and dropping of the atomic bomb on Japan in the 1940s. That's what the Manhattan Project was. So this is supposed to be a Manhattan Project type of initiative. Well, this alone indicates that wickedness is written all over it. So what is this secret group and what are they plotting? Well, why is wickedness written all over it? Well, the FDA is responsible for the approval of drugs and vaccines for use and distribution in the United States. So I wonder if the US Congress, as an entire body, knows anything about these secret meetings, since transparency is supposed to be the hallmark of a democracy. Well, since the Holy Quran is the law of the land, of the kingdom of Allah, then what does it say about secretive meetings? It states in the Holy Quran, secret counsels are only of the devil, that he may cause to grieve those who believe, and he can hurt them not except with Allah's permission, and on Allah let the believers rely. The Messiah being in our midst indicates that Allah does not desire that we become victims of the wicked schemes of heartless and satanic demons. Well, based on various mathematical models used to arrive at guesses for the proliferation of COVID-19, millions of Americans are estimated to be carriers of this virus. Well, what does this have to do with this secret group of ultra-rich industry titans who have influenced the Department of Veterans Affairs and also the FDA? We'll get to that question, or to the answer. Meanwhile, state governments are increasingly becoming more tyrannical. For example, patrons cannot enter public stores without wearing face masks. And in some locations, armed security officers are at the entrances. This is in your general grocery store. Well, this invites violence from people who are already stressed out by the loss of their jobs and retirement funds. But you'll learn the hard way. You need an armed security guard at the door. Well, most people have no problem wearing protective masks. So of course that would be taken as an insult to them, and it would be an offense to them. So you better rethink that approach. But what is the next stage in this agenda? Is this tiny network of ultra-rich industry titans behind the rush to develop vaccines based on what is clearly dubious knowledge of the coronavirus? And what you mean by dubious knowledge? Well, the argument or debate is still on the table. Was it made in nature? Or was it man-made? Some experts have said COVID-19 were in flu vaccines going back to 2013 and 15. That's why many people being tested already have antibodies for it. Some other scientists are saying that it's a monstrous disease that's going to take years to get over. So there's a whirlwind of confusion surrounding just what it is that we're facing. And on top of that, there's also been a notice of coronavirus or COVID-19 related deaths. And I don't know what related means. But in some cases, it means that COVID-19 wasn't at all involved. But maybe because of expedience, they had to put that on the death certificate of that person. So all of these schemes and confusion is just inundating the people. So the knowledge of the coronavirus is indeed dubious. Well, no doubt some citizens will welcome a coronavirus vaccine, according to a so-called recent poll that I saw the other day. But we know that the satanic mass news media is trying to work its way towards justifying mass vaccination of the US population. And as such, will the so-called US government require its citizens to be injected with coronavirus vaccines? Will US citizens need to show proof that they have been vaccinated with so-called COVID-19 vaccines in order to enter public food markets and institutions, like they need to wear face masks to enter at this point? Well, as it stands, over the last few years, most states have eliminated vaccine exemptions under so-called public health laws. Now, given the link between vaccines and autism, which is a clear link, this is blatant tyranny. Now, you can require me to wear a protective face mask or protective clothing, but you cannot force me to have anything injected in my body, no more than you can force me to eat a certain type of food. You are not my creator. In fact, you are my enemy. Now, I've written certain books years ago on vaccines. And it's anti-compulsory vaccination, 2 volumes of that. very measured and research filled. But I'm just saying that to say that we should begin to avail ourselves to more deeper knowledge on vaccination, its drawbacks, and so-called its likely benefits. Well, I know from Allah that these satanic demons are headed in that direction. This is one of their plots. There are several so-called potential COVID-19 vaccines under clinical trials that will be fast-tracked under the Trump administration's Operation Warp Speed. Their aim is to have millions of vaccines available this year. Well, fast-track when it comes to vaccination development means that the world's population becomes the guinea pig. And any microbiologist worth its weight in your education will attest to that, unless you're just frightened to death too and willing to put people as well as yourself at enormous risk. You know, and I know, it takes many years to know the dangerous side effects of vaccines because they work long term. Notwithstanding, according to the ingredients in vaccines, we're also alerted at the dangers we face when vaccines are injected directly into our bodies. So you can call a vaccine whatever you want. MMR, hepatitis, COVID-19. But what's in the vial? If the vial contains mercury, aluminum, and other dangerous metals, I know that my neurological system is in trouble when that substance is injected in my body, as well as chemicals like embalming fluid, and most of all, genetically engineered substances of lower animals and insects. There are insects' DNA in some vaccines, lower animal DNA in some vaccines. So that's the danger involved in vaccination. So to me, your concoction of a vaccine is more dangerous than the coronavirus at this point. So I suspect that when public schools and universities eventually open, children will be required to have received the coronavirus vaccine before entering the schools. And you know, the American public has been so dumbed down. Recent research talked about the math and reading and science levels of American students compared to other nations, and they're all the way down at the bottom. So if your scientific and mathematical thinking is at the bottom, then you are not thinking logically about anything. And that's a danger for you and your children, because you will just follow what they tell you, even though you know that you may be in danger. So the coronavirus vaccine may be one that students are required to take above the dozens that they already take, which is probably why the math and scientific scores are all the way at the bottom. So we know that many black people are suspicious and distrustful of so-called American government medicine and medical agendas, because we have been the victims of gross experimentation. From being injected with syphilis to the development of crack cocaine and who knows what else took place on the plantation when we were in chattel slavery for 310 years. Well, Allah knows that the intention of the US government is to eventually quarantine and inject black communities with so-called coronavirus vaccines. That's your intention. That's what you're leading to. It begins with the mask, but it'll culminate into you must have this vaccine. Well, when you begin to make your move to quarantine black communities and force injecting this chemical concoction of death into the veins of our children, then I'm warning you from Allah that once you begin to do that, He will begin to destroy your cities.